Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and explore a really fascinating story that is literally hiding in plain sight. We're going to track how the everyday furniture we live with evolved, and it's all through this fierce, decades-long clash between old world craft and new world mass manufacturing.
So, have you ever looked closely at the chair you're sitting on right now? Seriously, take a second. Because what's really interesting here is that the chair beneath you isn't just some random place to rest. It actually represents a full century of dramatic technological innovation and intense social conflict. It is practically a physical record of how we learned to build our modern world. You get this extreme visual whiplash right at the dawn of the 20th century. Just look at the smooth, curved wood of Michael Thonet's Snow 14 chair. This was a total triumph of affordable, wooden mass production for the masses back in 1859. But then, right next to it, you have Frank Lloyd Wright's 1904 Larkin office chair, which is this uncompromising, almost brutalist metal design. And this stark contrast? It perfectly sets up our central conflict, factory efficiency versus the search for radical new aesthetics. Which brings us to Section 1, Craft versus Mass Production in the early 20th century. At the time, a lot of designers felt completely surrounded by poorly made, mass-industrialized goods, and well, they decided to fight back. Just read this 1903 motto from the Vienna workshops: better to work 10 days on one product than to manufacture 10 products in one day. It so perfectly captures their resolutely craft-focused rebellion against the modern assembly line. They desperately wanted to return to highly original integrated design, basically pitching themselves directly against the cheap utilitarian stuff that was just flooding the market.
Take Gerrit Rietveld's work, for example. Back in 1917, he created this prototype and took a totally avant-garde approach. He deconstructed furniture down to its absolute structural essence, stripping away every bit of traditional adornment. Now, critics at the time absolutely mocked his highly structural work. They called it a mere dust catcher because of all those flat horizontal surfaces. But he was actually paving the way for a completely new rationale in design.
Moving on to Section 2, the steel tube revolution during the 1920s Bauhaus era. Following the massive seismic shock of World War I, the quest to merge form and manufacturing shifted away from heavy wood and moved toward light, airy metal. The 1920s brought incredibly rapid innovation, and this was fueled largely by the legendary Bauhaus school in Germany. Students there were experimenting freely with form and material. Almost overnight, tubular steel went from being this quirky experimental concept into the absolute defining material of the modern movement. It was the ultimate alignment of new materials with modern manufacturing.
And this era gave birth to a very specific architectural breakthrough, the cantilever. Basically, this is a design where a chair is anchored at only one end, completely eliminating the need for back legs. No back legs at all. This was only possible because designers realized just how immensely strong and flexible the newly available chrome-plated steel actually was.
A chair seemingly floating on bent steel had an absolutely unprecedented visual impact. Dutch architect Mart Stam is the one credited with producing the first of its kind in 1927. The whole idea of sitting on what looked like thin air was so revolutionary that it eventually sparked a massive patent dispute in the German courts. We're talking Stam facing off against other heavyweights like Marcel Breuer.
Section 3, Plywood and the War Effort in the 1930s and 40s. As the economic depression and the sudden outbreak of World War II took hold, global circumstances changed drastically. These immense crises caused severe material shortages everywhere. But pressure breeds innovation. These constraints forced designers to adapt wartime rationing rules and even advanced aerospace technologies, like the techniques used for making wooden airplanes, into everyday domestic life.
You can see a flawless example of this adaptation in Finnish architect Alvar Aalto's Paimio armchair from 1930. Aalto managed a massive breakthrough here. He figured out exactly how to laminate large, complex one-piece forms out of wood. He proved that timber didn't have to be carved or super heavy. It could actually be bent into sweeping, organic shapes and remain a highly modern material.
And strict government rationing, like the UK's utility scheme that started in 1941, actually had a silver lining. It enforced really strict guidelines on maximum material use. Ironically, this resulted in highly functional, incredibly restrained designs like these pieces by Clive Latimer shown in 1946 that were remarkably sustainable and honestly still hold up to contemporary scrutiny today.
By 1949, two completely distinct paths to mid-century greatness had emerged side by side. First, you have Charles and Ray Eames' low arm chair, which is this mass-produced marvel of molded plywood directly born from their work designing laminated leg splints for the U.S. military during World War II. Contrast that with Hans Wegener's wishbone chair, a beautifully mature, modern Danish design that still required a tremendous amount of traditional, labor-intensive bench work to produce. Two distinct paths to greatness.
And finally, Section 4, the plastic miracle of the 1950s and 1960s.
We entered this booming post-war era of consumerism, where the absolute holy grail of design was finally within reach, a chair made entirely in one single piece. Designers were eagerly exploring the potential of new plastics. However, early attempts, like this colorful 1964 child's chair by Richard Sapper and Marco Zanuzzo, still had to be assembled from multiple separate pieces because of limits in manufacturing and tooling sizes. They just hadn't quite cracked the code for a seamless adult-sized chair yet.
But things changed rapidly. In 1963, Robin Day launched his polypropylene chair, and it became an absolute commercial juggernaut. Thanks to new injection molding techniques, they eventually sold over 14 million units. 14 million! It proved beyond a shadow of a doubt the enormous democratic potential of mass-produced plastic seating.
Which brings us to a specific, industry-changing concept, the monoblock. This is a product injection molded into a single, seamless piece of material, requiring absolutely no assembly. Zero. The monoblock represented the total ultimate victory of efficient mass production over that painstaking assembly of traditional craft we started our journey with.
Werner Panton's stunning 1967 cantilever chair is the ultimate realization of this idea. It is literally squeezed seamlessly from a single mold. It unites a perfect, sweeping, organic form with absolutely effortless manufacturing. It's a true masterpiece of material flow.
Just think about that journey for a second. In just a few decades, we completely transformed the way we live and the environments we inhabit. We shifted from bespoke, handcrafted objects that took 10 days just to make one, to beautifully democratic, mass-manufactured masterpieces that roll off the assembly line by the millions.
So we've conquered bent wood, we've mastered tubular steel, and we've shaped liquid plastic into seamless perfection. As you sit in your chair today, I want you to look around and ask yourself, what revolutionary new material will entirely reimagine the furniture of our future? Will it be 3D printed? Grown from biomaterials? Whatever it is, the innovator's journey is far from over. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep looking closely at the design all around you.